Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experience. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. We'll be bringing you their perspectives on how digital transformation is reshaping the way we recruit, engage, and graduate learners. You'll hear firsthand accounts of how institutional leaders are developing their strategy, as well as get deeper on the stories of how these EdTech tools are being built to foster better student outcomes. With that, let's get to today's episode. Welcome back, everyone, to another bonus live episode. Higher Ed Geek Podcast, recorded at ASU+GSV here in sunny San Diego. We're doing this episode out by the pool, a nice little sunny spot here. We're kind of making our way out. It's a very large, diverse kind of conference space here, so it's very nice. Enjoy the nice weather. But we're here with Kate from Unicon. If you want to briefly introduce yourself, your role, and the work that Unicon does.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It is a beautiful setting out here on a very sunny day. My name's Kate Valenti. I am the CEO of Unicon. I'm not a founder, but I've been with the company for 23 of its 33 years. So I've seen quite a bit of the EdTech space change in that time. My early career was in enterprise application integration. I started my work at Cap Gemini Ernst Young and decided I did not want to be a road warrior and found Unicon through a friend. And what I discovered was it was a very unassuming but powerful group of really, really smart people. And it challenged me over my career to tackle interesting challenges, do new things with peers who are very, very intelligent. And then at some point I thought, this is a business, this is a company that is worth continuing and expanding. And I moved into a role leading integrations at Unicon, and then I moved into a chief operating officer role. And then when our founders were ready to retire, I moved into the CEO role.
And I think, this event, obviously seminal EdTech event, just curious kind of like how you and your team are showing up this year. And, we're kind of nearing the end of the second full day. Any reflections from the event so far? Whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, well, so Unicon, I describe us as a digital learning enablement firm. That's intentionally broad because our work is to be a partner for institutions, for EdTechs, and for funders and philanthropies, wherever they're trying to do something and either they need skills or they need capacity, trying to be the partner that helps them to actually get work done. So whatever those digital learning roadmaps are, Unicon has teams that we can bring to bear to help actually deliver, build, and design and deliver on software or on strategic advisory. So our work at GSV is always first and foremost about relationships. It's such a great forum to see lots and lots of people that deepen relationships. And as we all work in this sort of remote first workforce that we're in now, the ability to sit down and share a meal with a client or a potential client or just somebody working in the space that we want to deepen relationship with, but also talk about what could be. You don't often set up Zoom meetings just to sort of go, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? But here we can sit down, and I just spent an hour with one of my favorite clients, and we were talking about what else is happening in this space that we could be solving. So definitely relationships are at the top of the list for GSV. For me, it's a bit about the market scan. So what's happening here that I know to be true and making sure that I'm watching that and validating that the buzz, the vibe is what I expect it to be. What are the hot topics, which we knew this year would be AI. I think we're also seeing, though, infrastructure as a hot topic and skills and workforce as a hot topic, which aligns very well with the work that we're doing. And so that's been very validating. And then third, I'll say we come to be curious and be open to learning things that we did not know were happening or people that we did not know were in this space. There's always somebody who shows up and I go, oh, that's an interesting organization or company that I didn't know cared or mattered in this space, but that has a story to tell. I'm still looking for that one. So we have one more day tomorrow. I'm hoping to discover that through sessions.
Yeah, just manifesting here,
that's
just
right.
put it out in the universe.
I'm sure there will be one out there that I will stumble upon. But yep, relationships, definitely market scan, definitely making sure that we keep apprised of what's going on in the space.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think it is interesting that because some, organizations will make some sort of like big announcement like leading in or they're like kind of really touting like a new feature or whatever else. But I think those things almost are like always going to be objectively true for, anybody coming here should be doing some, varying levels of those things, the relationship building, they kind of pulse check on kind of what's happening, what are a lot of people talking about, or what are, a lot of companies working on, and that sort of thing. But then, kind of leaving space or opportunity or, even sometimes seeking out, trying to find kind of a novel, new, sort of different, unique thing. Because certainly, there's, companies of all sizes and shapes and, tenures and all that kind of stuff. And speaking of which, setting myself up for a perfect segue, you were mentioning, Unicon is, around like 30 years old. You've been there for most of that time. Curious, because I think a rare opportunity of, kind of that continuity with one organization. How has the work changed? How has it stayed the same? Because I think, we love just talking about, the digital infrastructure of institutions and interoperability, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But just curious how that kind of work has changed or stayed the same.
Yeah, so 33 years old, if you think about what was happening in 1993, if I said to you, digital learning, it would look very different than here as we sit in 2026. The support for schools, companies that want to be doing digital learning, what are the technologies that are available to us to be able to set up good learner-centric environments? What are the ways that we can extend those environments to really make them work for the learner? Those questions in one form or another have been consistent. But what we see now is our learner demographic is really shifting and the expectations are shifting with it. So whereas, back then, it was very, very limited, but over the years, we put in infrastructure, we put in systems that supported the learner, but also were heavily administrative. They supported faculty, they supported staff in supporting the learner. And what we're seeing now is almost a shift to the learners saying, I need to see the ROI for what I'm putting into this. So I'm paying fees to make sure that I get a return on that investment. And so you need to hold me in the center of what you're doing. And I expect that my experience is going to be good. And it used to be, I expected my in-classroom experience was going to be positive. Now I expect to be able to look at things on my phone or on a tablet. The where of learning is changing. You're also seeing such an emphasis on adult learning and returning learners, continuing learners. And they have very different needs of when they learn, how they learn. And so the technology has to move with that. And as a consulting and services organization, our job is to help clients solve the problems that they have today. And so the problems that they have today are, how do we make sure that the learning that we are providing is effective for the outcomes that these learners need, which in most cases is jobs. So how do we make sure that our work stays relevant to be sure that we're getting them the upward mobility in terms of their finances? And what are the changing expectations that they have that we need to be moving with? So whether it's recognizing learning that they had coming into something, whether it's competency-based learning where they're going, I need to build a very specific skill set to be able to move forward in the job that I already have. Lots of different expectations with learners. And so the technology has to shift. It's not about the learning management system so much. That's a core piece of the foundational architecture. But then it's how do we make sure that we can get access to all of the tools that we can make that data work for that learner. Expectations shift as the needs of the customer shift. And I think that higher ed, a lot of institutions are coming around to the understanding that they are a business that serves a customer. And as those customers' needs change, they have to adjust in order to continue to keep those customers happy.
Yeah, a lot there and a lot of great perspectives in the sense of being responsive to sort of, demands and needs and preferences and, all those sort of things in terms of today's learners, increasingly, adult learners and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, even an interesting point where you're saying you work with people who need to solve the problems of today and right now. And it's one of those things where certainly things that you can do now will, have a good shelf life kind of thing. You might not be we have to keep doing different new, whatever things. And it's just a constant chaos, whatever. But even that idea of because the joke that I've made sometimes in these sort of situations is if somebody was way too bullish on the metaverse and we got to create the meta university and virtual reality, everything and whatever, it's that would have been you're looking a little too far ahead. But yeah, mentioning interoperability before, obviously we talked about a lot that a lot on the show. I'm just curious to make sure we kind of get your point of view, your perspective on that work. How are institutions kind of navigating it right now, and what makes that work so critical?
Yeah, interoperability. My early career, as I said, was in integration application, and I built the integration practice at Unicon, and so interoperability is near and dear to my heart. I won't say that we've solved product level interoperability, but the standards that we have in ed tech have gone a long, long way toward giving us interoperability. So when you think of our work really centers around learning environments. So when you think about the types of interoperability that we need for those, the LTI takes us a long way to being able to launch out into products, into tools that can support learning. And that interoperability space is, I think, finally acknowledged by the ed tech market as an important component of how we deliver services to students. For a long time, it was the connections in between things were like, we had to do that, but we sort of did it begrudgingly because people complained. And now being able to tell your interoperability story of how your product fits into the larger learning environment is really a key piece of how ed techs have to serve their market. But the most interesting thing to me in terms of interoperability right now is the next challenge that we have, which is we now are beyond the interoperability within an institution, and we have moved to how do we create interoperability between institutions and the workforce when they have separate standards, when they have separate workflows, when they have separate expectations. And so that's really the interoperability work that we're interested in at this stage is how do we move skills data out of an educational context into an employer context? Most skills data is pretty much locked in ed tech products. And so being able to extract that out or move that, create more mobility for that skills data in order to power those downstream workflows that learners need that can work on learners' behalf is a really interesting interoperability challenge. And that's part of what I'm listening for at the conference is who's doing that and who's doing it at a scale that we can take note of.
Yeah, I don't this feeling just kind of, came up for me of like with what you're saying is like just across the board with so many things I think in higher ed, it's like how can we leverage tools and have everything work better together to like ensure things that we hope and believe can and should and are happening actually do happen versus like kind of putting the onus on the student or making a lot of assumptions or different things like that, in the sense of like integration or kind of pipeline into workforce in terms of, the student being able to kind of, capture the skills that they, have or, understand what do they need to do and learn to, achieve the type of roles that they're looking for or whatever else. Like those type of behaviors or things are not new, but it's just assumed like, hey, if, you want to be an accountant, you know what you have to do, right? You just are again, like riding along the rails or whatever else. But I don't know. So I think that's just like an interesting wrinkle to all of this. It's like some of it in the idea of like, utilizing technology to help community building. It's like students have been doing that at college. That's kind of one of the value propositions. Like you build your social network, you meet friends for a lifetime. But like, how can we ensure that everyone has the capacity and the ability, just the opportunity to build community in the way that works well for them or, that everybody feels like they kind of have that, have an avenue to kind of do that wherever they're kind of starting from. If it's like, yeah, I moved from away. I'm, my home is thousands of miles away. I don't know anybody here. I don't know anything, whatever. So, all that's kind of swirling in my mind. But I think, it is sort of another kind of paradigm shift is that idea of like ed tech companies have to have a good answer right now for like, how do they play nice with all the other, ed tech tools and tech stack and institution and, those other things. So
it is really about the ecosystem. And we've been saying that forever. And there have been a lot of champions of making sure that people were playing well together, but it's become an expectation now. It's not good enough to have a product that sits on its own, but you have to be able to play in the ecosystem.
As we wind down, we've talked about a lot. I felt like it'd be good, to give honorable mention here to AI and how it may be impacting your workflows internally and externally. So take that question as you will.
Yeah, AI. AI is one of those things that's creating a ton of noise, which is a challenge. And I think it's taking away from some conversations. Again, schools have real problems today. They have real challenges that they need to solve today. And I think the introduction of AI has been a bit of an obstacle in taking away some focus from problems we know we have that we can solve with current technology. So that's just I'll put the wet blanket on at the beginning. On the positive side, AI is challenging our entire organization. So think about software engineers, project leaders, strategic advisors, and even our operational executives to think about how can we be using this tool to do the things that we need to do better, faster. How can we use them creatively to improve the work that we do? So that's fun because that's an exploration process. And one of our core values is curiosity. So you tend to attract people who are curious. And so they want to try the tools. So that's been good. We also, because we serve clients, we also have the challenge of how can we and should we use these tools to serve our clients? What will clients expect of us from an AI perspective, and where will they not want us to use it? And how are we transparent about the way that it's being used? So it's a different time in exploring tools that can help you to do the work that you do, but do it, maybe we spend less time on research, but we spend more time in the human aspects of the judgment that 33 years of experience in ed tech has brought us perspectives that we can share. Sure, AI can generate text, but it can't generate that judgment. And so we have to think about those things that we uniquely bring to our clients and make sure that we are putting the emphasis on those, using the tools to produce the things that we would produce anyway that would probably take longer, but then also making sure that the emphasis is on what we bring based on experience, based on real experience from the field.
Yeah, and I think just sort of like a gut check with what you were saying again, like something that's coming up is the idea of like putting wet blankets or whatever. But I think it's reasonable to kind of like, measured approach to all this or whatever. But like, because it does still feel like in certain moments, certainly like from, a company to an institution that they're like still probably needing, or like their perspective is like, I've got to convince you that AI is something that you want or need, like, it's like, is it a helpful augment, supplement, whatever, but like, yeah, let's not overhype it or overpromise on it or, anything like that, and just kind of take a measured approach, understand like what is the unique value that, our people, provide and all of that. But yeah, I'd imagine not many institutions are like going to their ed tech vendors or something and be like, give me all the AI. I need all your AI, whatever. It's just sort of like, you could maybe say like, yeah, we're looking into it. We're evaluating it. We're, experimenting and all of that. We're not going to like just rush in or say we're doing it when it's not really actually that, or not actually anything that's like, substantial or new. But
we have had ed tech clients that have said, we want to build an AI first something, or we want to be AI first. And so our first question is always, what does that mean to you? And typically what it means is that somebody on a board or somebody high up said, we should be doing something with AI. And somebody said, okay, we'll ask our software engineering partner to help us through that. And that's okay. I think that healthy exploration of what's possible is important. We have, Unicon has a set of AI tenets. It's what we believe to be true about AI and where we will and won't use it. And we have a rule that says we will use it pragmatically when it is the right tool for the job. So we do absolutely have software development projects right now that are building features that are taking advantage of AI as a tool because it is the best tool for the job in the specific case of those requirements, but not because somebody wanted to be AI first, but because it was the right tool for the job.
Makes sense. As we're winding down, being respectful of your time, final question we're asking everybody, advice that you would give to other higher ed leaders navigating in this moment.
And so I have a sticky note at my desk that says, if clients don't need us for the things they need us for today, what will they need us for? And I come back to that question on a weekly basis and I say, okay, if our world has shifted and some of the value of things we do in evaluation or in upfront diligence are easier, where can we shift up the value chain with our clients? Where will they need those human things, the judgment? And I think that's an important question for us all to be asking ourselves is, as things shift, what will the needs of our clients shift? And for us, that's clients, but for schools, that's learners. So how will their needs and expectations shift as AI becomes more prevalent, as we see better what it's good at and what it's not, and where it makes sense to deploy and where we want to hold off. So I would recommend some kind of deep thinking for other education leaders to just make sure that you're asking yourself that early and often as you serve your clients. How is our world going to shift, and how do we need to shift to go along?
Yeah, because it could be for institutional leaders, like how can we continue providing value, to our students for their whole lifelong learning, like something like that kind of comes to mind. But then also like, I think for everybody, it's like you need to always try to give some level of attention to like
where the ball is going, you know, like, 'cause you don't want to end up like the, you know, the Blockbusters of the world or whatever, where it's like, we're deeply committed to the thing we do, you know, forever and always. And it's like, yes, like there's always going to be, you know, an importance of like wherever you are now, that is not likely to just like snap away in an instant, but like making those kind of incremental steps to acknowledge like, okay, we just really have not built out our digital education portfolio. We need to be making moves in that way. Like that is just increasingly something that learners of all ages, you know, and backgrounds, or whatever else, are demanding, you know, just the ability of like, you know, if it's, you do most of your classes in person, but you want to take this class, it'd be tough, you know, balancing that with work and life and whatever else, but it's like, hey, it's available online. I could make that work or whatever. I don't know. So yeah, I think that's applicable across the board. Good advice. Appreciate you hanging out, sharing all that you did, sitting out here in the beautiful sun with me, and ways to connect with you and Unicon in the episode description. And yeah, just have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you so much. It was enjoyable.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.